So we spend like millions of dollars and thousands of hours, I mean, really years of our lives, just obsessing over these external structures we build.
Oh, definitely, like our careers or our bank accounts.
Right. We build our physical homes and we curate these massive, outward-facing personas. But there's this really haunting argument from a 19th century text that says, well, we're actually focused on the totally wrong construction site.
Yeah, the idea that we're guilty of building these towering, glittering skyscrapers, but they're just sitting right on top of a swamp.
Exactly. And then we wonder why we constantly feel like the floor is giving out beneath us, right? So today, we are jumping into this incredibly dense, really layered text called Morals and Dogma.
Which is quite the read.
It really is. But the mission for today's deep dive is to understand why your life is, quite literally, an active construction site, and why you urgently need to audit the blueprint you're actually using.
Yeah, because making that transition from, abstract philosophy into tangible reality, that is the hardest bridge to cross in human development.
Oh, for sure. It's so easy to just stay in our heads.
Right. And Morals and Dogma, which was published back in 1871 by Albert Pike, it's this huge encyclopedic synthesis of world religions and ancient philosophies. And it's notoriously difficult to parse,
I mean, it's a brick of a book.
literally. But buried right inside it is Chapter 8, and it's titled The Intendant of the Building. And what Pike does here is he takes these grand, sweeping ideas like equity and justice and truth and forces them into a hyper-practical framework.
Which I love because it moves away from just, what do you believe,
Yeah.
to this inescapable question.
Exactly. And the central question of our whole deep dive today, what are you building with your life?
What are you building? Yeah.
Right. It asks you to look at human existence not as just a series of random events that happen to you, but as a deliberate, architectural undertaking.
And to really grasp why that specific title, The Intendant of the Building, matters, we kind of have to look at the historical and mythological context he was pulling from.
Yeah, the text is really heavily rooted in the allegorical construction of King Solomon's temple.
Right, where the mythos says the chief architect of the temple is murdered, and it just leaves this massive unfinished monument in total chaos. The workers are all scattered, the designs are lost.
The whole project is basically on the brink of total collapse.
Yes, and an intendant is appointed to step into that massive void. And they aren't just like a laborer, they are a superintendent, a chief overseer.
The person who has to restore order.
Exactly. They dictate where the stones go, and they make sure the structure actually rises according to one central vision.
And that context is just so vital because it completely reframes how we view our own agency. When the text challenges you to become the intendant of your own building, it is demanding extreme ownership.
Extreme ownership, I like that.
Yeah, because you are stepping into the chaos of your own life, right? Scattered habits, the broken routines, the half-finished projects, and you are taking command of the site.
It's like you're putting on the hard hat and saying, okay, I'm in charge here.
Precisely. Pike uses architecture because it's the ultimate synthesis of vision and material reality. A building is the deliberate shaping of the future.
You're taking raw, unrefined materials, like your time, your energy, your everyday conversations, and arranging them in a way that, well, defies gravity and entropy.
Right. But we have to apply that metaphor to the actual domains of a human life, because obviously we aren't pouring literal concrete here.
Yeah, we're dealing with psychological and social architecture.
Exactly. The text applies this to personal growth, where you are basically constructing your own resilience. It applies to society, where your actions become the infrastructure of your community.
And the most revealing application for me is how it frames relationships. Because, modern culture treats relationships like passive real estate.
Oh, totally. Think about the language we use.
Right. We say we fall in love, or we find a great friend, or we stumble across a mentor.
It implies that relationships are just these pre-built houses we just happen to wander into and get comfortable in.
But the intendant mindset completely dismantles that romanticized passivity. A relationship is never just found. It's constructed from the ground up, brick by brick.
Yeah, every time you show up for someone when it's super inconvenient, you are laying a brick of trust.
And the shared experiences, those late-night conversations, the conflicts you actually resolve, that's the mortar that binds the bricks together.
Right. And think about the difference in mindset. If you view a relationship as a pre-built house, what happens the moment the roof leaks?
You move out. You assume it's defective.
Exactly. You abandon the structure. But if you view it as a construction project, a crack in the foundation like, say, a minor breach of trust, It doesn't automatically trigger abandonment.
Because you're the intendant. You assess the structural damage, you mix some more mortar of forgiveness and communication, and you repair the wall.
Right, but I know what people are thinking right now.
Oh, I know what I'm thinking. Mixing the mortar of forgiveness requires a total breakdown of its own. In material science, mortar works because of a chemical reaction between cement, sand, and water that hardens over time.
Right, it's an active, ongoing process.
Yeah. In psychological terms, forgiveness isn't just saying, oh, hey, I accept your apology. It's the active combination of vulnerability, setting new boundaries, and repeatedly observing change behavior.
Yeah.
And that process is absolutely exhausting.
It really is.
So isn't there a massive cognitive problem with viewing your whole life as a perpetual construction site? Like, human brains just aren't wired for relentless 24/7 executive function.
Oh, well, for sure. We suffer from major decision fatigue.
Exactly. If I have to treat my marriage, my career, my gym routine, and even my weekend downtime as this high-stakes construction project where I'm always wearing a metaphorical hard hat, I mean, I'm going to suffer severe psychological burnout.
And that cognitive load is a very real limitation of human neurobiology. If you interpret the intendant's role as just being in a state of hypervigilance all the time,
Yeah, like micromanaging every single brick in real time.
right, then your prefrontal cortex will absolutely fry itself. But the architecture metaphor actually solves for this, if you look closely.
Wait, really? How?
Because the entire goal of building is to create structural integrity so the building can stand on its own.
Oh, right. You don't hold the walls up forever.
Exactly. When you first establish a habit or set a boundary in a relationship, yes, it requires immense conscious effort. You are actively laying that brick. But over time, the mortar cures.
It hardens.
Right. The habit moves from the conscious prefrontal cortex to the basal ganglia. It becomes an automatic routine. The relationship starts to rely on a solid foundation of established trust.
So the intendant isn't just frantically running around propping the walls up with their bare hands every day. They've designed a structure that supports itself.
Which allows them to actually rest within the walls they've built.
That makes so much sense because the passive consumer of life feels exhausted anyway, because life is just constantly happening to them.
Right. They're always reacting to the weather, dodging falling debris, complaining about the terrible terrain.
But the active architect finds energy in the actual agency of creation. Yes, the work is hard, but it stops being meaningless toil. It transforms from, I have to survive this week, to, I am building this specific room in my life.
But, and this is a huge, but that assumes you actually know what the room is supposed to look like.
Ah, yeah. The blueprint.
Right. You can have the most energized, resilient intendant on the planet, but if they walk onto the job site without a blueprint, their effort is worse than useless.
It's destructive.
Totally destructive, because effort without a blueprint just generates the illusion of progress.
Oh, the illusion of progress. That is so real.
You can sweat from dawn until dusk, moving heavy piles of bricks from the north side of the lot all the way to the south side. You'll be exhausted, your muscles will ache, and you will feel like you worked incredibly hard.
But at the end of the day, there's no structure. You just relocated a pile of bricks.
Exactly. And the source material is completely ruthless in its critique of this scattered effort. Work absolutely must be guided by intention.
Because without a unifying purpose, the energy you expend is basically just thermodynamic heat, right?
Yeah.
It produces no light.
Yeah, not at all. And we see the psychological toll of this scattered effort everywhere in modern corporate culture.
Oh, hustle culture.
Yeah.
It entirely glorifies the exertion of energy, completely, regardless of the trajectory. People are sending emails at 2 in the morning, sitting in back-to-back meetings all day, just running themselves into the ground.
But if you pause all that chaotic motion and ask them, hey, what is the actual end goal of all this activity?
They usually don't have an answer. Beyond just basic survival or maybe some vague idea of accumulating wealth, they are just addicted to the physical act of moving the bricks.
This is where purpose matters. Purpose is the specific geometric design that dictates exactly where the brick goes.
Right. If you are working a grueling 60-hour week just to reach Friday, you're essentially serving a recurring prison sentence.
Yeah, a self-imposed one.
But if your blueprint involves, say, building a department that revolutionizes how your company handles sustainability, or mentoring 3 junior staff members so they can become executives in 5 years,
then those exact same 60 hours undergo a radical qualitative shift.
it totally changes the experience of the work.
It does. In fact, the physiological response to labor actually changes when it's attached to meaning. Studies in occupational psychology show that burnout is rarely caused solely by the sheer volume of hours worked.
Wait, really? It's not just about the hours.
No, it's most frequently caused by a disconnect between the effort expended and the perceived meaning of the outcome.
Wow, so it's about feeling like your work is pointless.
Exactly. Society obsessively catalogs the what of our lives. What is your title? What is your square footage? What is your investment portfolio doing? It's just a constant inventory of raw materials.
But the intendant ignores the inventory of the what and relentlessly interrogates the why.
Yes, because the why is the blueprint that organizes the what into a coherent shape.
I love that.
Yeah.
But auditing your own life for this kind of scattered effort requires confronting something really uncomfortable. The sunk cost fallacy.
Oh, the hardest part of the job site.
Right. Let's look at the Winchester Mystery House in California as an analogy. Have you ever seen it?
I know of it, yeah. It's wild.
It is this massive, sprawling mansion built by Sarah Winchester in the late 1800s. And she kept building it continuously for decades without a master blueprint. Allegedly because she believed that as long as construction never stopped, she wouldn't die.
Which is just a terrifying way to build.
Completely terrifying. And the result is a total architectural nightmare. There are staircases that go straight into ceilings, doors that open to two-story drops, windows that look directly into other rooms.
It's a monument to chaotic effort.
Driven by fear rather than purpose. And people build their lives like the Winchester House all the time.
They really do. They dig a foundation in their 20s based on a college major they didn't even really want.
Because their parents told them to or whatever.
Yeah, right. And by their 40s, they are literally building staircases to nowhere just to keep the construction moving.
Because stopping feels like admitting defeat.
Exactly. But the intendant possesses the courage to walk the site, look at the sinking foundation, and issue a hard stop work order.
A stop work order on your own life, that takes guts.
It does, because defining your purpose requires you to project yourself forward to the end of the project. You have to ask, what is the impact you intend to leave?
And once you define that ultimate structure, every daily action becomes a filter, doesn't it?
Yes. You hold up a habit, argument, or even a purchase, and you ask, does this add a brick to the structure I am intending to build?
And if the answer is no, the action is discarded, just thrown in the dumpster.
Exactly. But having that pristine blue piece of paper with the white lines drawn on it, that's just a vital first step.
Right, because blueprints don't keep the rain off your head. Dreaming about a cathedral does not alter the physical landscape at all.
No, it doesn't. And the text makes a really hard pivot here, from the lofty philosophy of purpose to the brutal mechanics of execution.
There's a phrase from the source we need to dissect completely. It says, "Success is not accidental, it is designed."
Which completely obliterates the romanticized notion of the overnight success.
Or the chaotic genius who simply stumbles into brilliance. It's a myth.
A total myth. The triad of execution that moves a blueprint into reality actually consists of planning, organization, and consistency.
Which, let's be honest, we usually view as dry, bureaucratic terms.
Super dry. But in the context of building a life, they are the literal scaffolding.
I love the scaffolding analogy, because scaffolding is a fascinating architectural requirement. It is purely functional, it is usually really unsightly, and it completely obscures the beauty of the building while it is being erected.
You can't even see the building because of the metal poles everywhere.
Right, but without it, workers cannot reach the heights required to place the stones. They can't lift the heavy materials safely.
And discipline is the scaffolding of the human mind.
Setting a strict budget, enforcing a bedtime, scheduling your deep work blocks, none of this is glamorous. No one puts a picture of their Excel spreadsheet or their 5 a.m. alarm clock on a vision board.
Definitely not. But if you rely solely on the aesthetic beauty of your purpose to get the job done, you will fail.
Because that exposes the fatal flaw in how we rely on motivation.
Right. Motivation is just an emotional state. It's driven by the brain's dopamine system, which is highly, highly attuned to novelty.
So when you first look at the blueprint, dopamine spikes. You feel incredibly motivated.
Well, like, I'm going to change the world.
Yes. But dopamine is not designed to sustain long-term repetitive action.
It's not. The dopamine prediction error dictates that once the novelty of the project fades, the neurochemical reward drops, even if the importance of the project remains totally identical.
So motivation abandons the job site exactly when the work becomes repetitive and hard.
Exactly. And this is where the intendant relies on the scaffolding of discipline, because discipline does not require a specific emotional state to function.
It's just a predetermined structural agreement. You do it whether you feel like it or not.
Yeah. And we can see this perfectly illustrated in the construction of the Brooklyn Bridge.
Oh, this is such a good example. Washington Roebling, the chief engineer.
Right. He was struck down by decompression sickness, also known as the bends, from working deep underwater in the caissons.
Which is horrifying. He was paralyzed, bedridden, and physically incapable of even visiting the job site for over a decade.
Think about that. His motivation, his physical vitality, everything was stripped away.
But the structure of the project, the rigorous mathematics, the daily communication protocols he established with his wife Emily, who stepped in to take over the on-site management, all of that relentless adherence to the plans acted as the scaffolding.
And he just watched the bridge rise from his window for 14 years.
He didn't build the bridge with fleeting bursts of enthusiasm. It was built through the agonizing, unsexy consistency of the plan.
And when you compound that deliberate, disciplined action over years, the structure begins to rise completely independent of your emotional weather.
But the tragedy we see constantly is people tearing down half-built structures simply because they lacked the discipline to survive that messy, unglamorous phase of the scaffolding.
Yeah, they reach the difficult middle phase, the novelty dopamine wears off, they get bored, and they just tear the whole thing down to start a new blueprint somewhere else.
And they spend their entire lives living in a series of half-dug foundations.
It's tragic. The Intendant, on the other hand, commits to the design and pushes through the mundane reality of daily construction.
But, and there's a big but here, there's a fatal flaw in relying entirely on this external discipline and execution.
Oh, absolutely.
You can have the best routine in the world, the strongest scaffolding, the most efficient team, but if the person climbing that scaffolding is corrupt or hollow, the entire project is a huge liability.
Yeah, the text pauses its whole discussion on external legacy here and pivots violently inward.
Here's the deeper message. While Pike speaks volumes about building outwardly like shaping society and constructing careers, the most profound and challenging application of the Intendant is actually inward.
Right. We are not merely building monuments out in the world. We are simultaneously constructing the architecture of our own character.
The most important structure you will ever build is your own ethical and psychological framework.
Because if we look at historical and even modern examples of catastrophic failure, we rarely see a failure of external skills.
It's almost never a lack of talent.
Exactly. We see the collapse of the internal edifice. Consider individuals who build billion-dollar empires or achieve incredible global influence. They have clearly mastered the external architecture.
But if they build their internal character out of cheap materials like deceit, unmitigated ego, lack of empathy, or ethical shortcuts, they are constructing this massive, heavy structure on a foundation of sand.
And success is incredibly heavy.
It really is. It brings pressure, scrutiny, financial complexity, power.
And if your internal load-bearing walls are made of paper, the sheer weight of your own external success will crush you.
The Leaning Tower of Pisa is basically the perfect analog for this. It is a beautifully designed, aesthetically stunning external structure.
Gorgeous on the outside.
But the architects built it on a foundation of soft clay and fine sand. The internal ground simply couldn't support the external ambition.
And it started sinking almost immediately. The Intendant has to monitor the internal construction site with even more vigilance than the external one.
Because in materials science, structures often fail due to microfractures, right?
Yeah, tiny, invisible cracks in the steel that accumulate stress over time until a catastrophic failure finally occurs.
And in the human psyche, those microfractures are these seemingly harmless compromises of our values.
Like telling a small lie to avoid an uncomfortable conversation.
Or taking a slight shortcut on a deliverable at work.
Indulging in a flash of unwarranted anger. Each instance seems totally insignificant on its own, but it introduces a real fracture into the load-bearing pillars of your character.
But conversely, practicing the habit of telling the truth when it actually costs you something, or maintaining patience under duress, that is the act of reinforcing your internal structural integrity.
Yes. So, let's review where we are. We have audited our blueprint. We have erected the unsexy scaffolding of discipline to override the unreliability of motivation.
And we are meticulously inspecting our internal edifice to ensure we can handle the weight of our ambitions.
We are structurally sound individuals.
But a cathedral is not built by a single intendant. The scale of meaningful construction requires a massive workforce.
It does.
So how do we operate in a world of 8 billion people without totally losing our sense of agency?
The source material expands from the isolated individual to the mechanics of the collective here. It analyzes the absolute necessity of collaboration.
But it does so by addressing a really modern anxiety, the anxiety of insignificance.
Yeah. In a massive corporation or just a complex global society, it is terrifyingly easy to feel like a completely replaceable cog in a giant machine.
If you are a junior analyst or a warehouse worker or a teacher in a massive school district, it's so easy to look at the towering scale of the world and conclude that your specific contribution is utterly meaningless.
But the text provides a deeply reassuring counterargument to that anxiety. It insists that no contribution is insignificant.
With a crucial caveat, though.
Right, when aligned with a greater purpose. Let's look at the actual physics of a skyscraper for a second.
Okay.
We all know the name of the famous architect. We celebrate the CEO whose corporation occupies the penthouse. But the entire structure rests on the foundational work done by laborers 50 feet underground.
Like the Sandhogs.
Yes. The urban miners who dig the water tunnels and lay the deep foundations in places like New York City, their work is entirely invisible.
Nobody walking down Fifth Avenue ever stops to admire the aesthetic beauty of the rebar laid in the mud.
No one. Yet, if the invisible worker takes a shortcut, if they mix the concrete poorly or misalign the steel,
The architect's vision completely fails and the CEO's tower collapses.
exactly. The unseen worker holds up the sky.
I love that phrase. The unseen worker holds up the sky. The intendant understands that the hierarchy of visibility has absolutely nothing to do with the hierarchy of structural importance.
Which gives undeniable, profound dignity to everyday, seemingly invisible labor.
It really does. If you are the person organizing the supply closet at a medical clinic, you are the unseen mortar ensuring the frontline doctors have exactly what they need in a split-second crisis.
You are directly participating in the saving of lives.
There is a famous parable of the three bricklayers that illustrates this cognitive shift perfectly. Have you heard this one?
Oh, yes. The traveler asking them what they're doing.
Right. A traveler walks past a construction site and asks three different men what they are doing. The first man looks completely miserable and just says, "I am laying bricks."
Just a task.
Yeah. The second man looks tired but focused, and he says, "I am building a wall."
A bit more context.
But the third man has this sense of deep fulfillment, and he says, "I am building a cathedral."
And they're all doing the exact same physical motion. The raw materials are identical.
The only difference is their proximity to the blueprint.
That's it. True collaboration, when it's coordinated by an effective intendant, isn't just about dividing tasks on a spreadsheet. It is about aligning belief.
Because when everyone on the job site actually understands how their specific brick contributes to the cathedral, the work transcends mere labor.
It becomes a shared legacy. And legacy is really the final overarching theme of this entire philosophical framework.
Because the fundamental truth about architecture is that it deals with deep time. We build things specifically so they will outlast us.
Think about what you're building. If your life is a construction site, the undeniable reality is that eventually your time on the site will end.
You will clock out for the very last time. The tools will just be left where they fall.
So what is left standing when you are gone? We are not just building for our own immediate shelter or our own quick gratification.
Right. There's this concept called cathedral thinking. It comes from medieval builders who would begin constructing these vast, intricate cathedrals, knowing full well they would never live to see them finished.
They were laying foundations for structures that would be completed by their grandchildren.
And the intendant of the building must adopt this exact relationship with time. What are we leaving behind?
Are we leaving a robust framework, like a healthy business, a strong family culture, a scientific contribution, or a community program that provides shelter and utility to the next generation?
Or are we just leaving a chaotic pile of debris, half-finished projects, and unhealed psychological wounds for other people to clean up?
That is the ultimate test of the intendant.
So let's pull the massive, sprawling blueprint of this deep dive together. We started with the realization that life is not something you passively endure. It is an active process of construction, and you are the chief architect.
And we established that effort without a blueprint is just chaos, and that you must find the why to direct your energy.
We examine the harsh reality that motivation is neurologically unreliable, and that real success demands the unglamorous scaffolding of discipline and consistency.
We explored the critical necessity of building your internal character, knowing that a massive external legacy will completely collapse if the internal load-bearing walls are corrupt.
We reframed the anxiety of insignificance, proving that the invisible, foundational work is what actually holds up the sky when it is aligned with a shared vision.
And finally, we confronted the deep time of legacy, the absolute imperative to build something that provides shelter long after we are gone.
Because this isn't just a philosophy. It is a totally different operating system for how you move through the world.
It demands an elevated level of consciousness regarding your daily actions. It transforms the mundane right into the monumental.
So to everyone listening, I hope this blueprint challenges you to look at your routines, your relationships, and your work with entirely new eyes. Your mission is clear. Build with purpose, act with intention, and remember, what you create defines your legacy.
And as we step off the job site today, there's one final lingering concept to explore on your own. We have spent this entire time talking about addition.
Laying bricks, erecting scaffolding, pouring concrete.
Right, constructing something new. But true architecture often requires clearing the site first. What in your life currently needs to be deliberately demolished before you can start building something new and true?
Wow.
Sometimes swinging the wrecking ball is the most purposeful act of all.